This story begins with a man named Frank Perry who was locked up in prison. He was lost in deep thought, and his face clearly showed that he was about to do something he had never done before. After some time, Frank stepped out of his cell and walked toward the room of the most dangerous prisoner in the jail, Raza. On the other side, four prisoners were busy preparing to escape. They quickly removed the cover of a drain, dug a hole in the ground, and started going down one by one. Brody was standing there waiting for his close friend, Frank. Their original plan was to escape together. But at the last moment, instead of Frank, Lacey arrived there. Brody waited for his friend for some time. Then finally he also jumped into the hole. In a hurry he left his cap behind. A little while later Frank arrived there in an injured state. He picked up Brody's cap and immediately jumped into the hole. The truth was that, just a few months ago, Frank was living an ordinary life inside the prison just like the other inmates. His job was to wash clothes in the laundry room. Since he had been given a life sentence and had no hope of release, he had accepted the prison as his world. He spent most of his time alone and always kept his distance from the dangerous prisoner, Raza. After spending several years in jail, he had made a few friends. One day when he returned to his cell after finishing his work, he saw his cellmate packing his belongings. His sentence had ended and he was preparing to leave for home. On the other side, a new group of prisoners was being brought into the jail. The older inmates were standing there to watch them. The new prisoners were sprayed with an antibacterial powder and were wearing only underwear. The one who seemed the happiest at this moment was Raza's brother, Tony. He had spent so much time in prison that he had developed an attraction toward men. He liked teasing new inmates, and this time his eyes were fixed on a new prisoner named Lacey. A little while later, all the prisoners were sent to their cells, and Lacey became Frank's new cellmate. But Frank was not interested in him at all. When Lacey tried to talk to him, Frank completely ignored him. That same evening, Frank received a letter. For the past 14 years, he had been writing letters to his family, hoping that one day his daughter would reply. But in those 14 years, he had never received a single response. The letter he received today was from his wife. It stated that his daughter had been admitted to the hospital in a critical condition due to a drug overdose. She could die at any moment. As soon as Frank read this, his world turned upside down. The person he loved the most was now standing at the border between life and death. This news broke him from the inside. A little while later he went to the prison church. Seeing his condition, a guard opened the church doors for him even at night. After that, Frank went into the confession box. There he poured out his pain and started crying loudly. Now he wanted to meet his daughter one last time no matter what. The next morning, while working in the laundry, his eyes suddenly fell on the iron grill behind the washing machine. Right above it, there were some iron pipes that carried water out of the prison. Seeing this, a big plan started forming in Frank's mind. After some time, Frank met his closest friend, Brody. During their conversation, he asked Brody if the air vents attached to the machine were connected to the prison's sewage system. Hearing this, Brody was shocked. But when Frank showed him the letter from his wife, Brody understood everything. Frank wanted to escape from the prison at any cost, and that too as soon as possible. For this he needed help. Actually, Brody had good experience in digging tunnels because he had once dug a tunnel under the prison before. After thinking for a while, he agreed to help Frank because he was also serving a life sentence in this prison. A few days later, Frank met a dangerous boxer named Lenny. He was about to be released on parole. But Frank's former cellmate had snitched on him. Due to this, his parole got cancelled. Now, Lenny was extremely restless for revenge, and Frank was going to take advantage of this. Frank told Lenny about his plan. He approached him because Lenny was skilled in using different tools. At first, Lenny hesitated. But after thinking for some time, he agreed to join the plan. After that, Frank met his other two companions. While pretending to play, they were secretly discussing their escape plan. They had only one way to escape from prison, which was through the laundry room. But to reach there they had to pass through 3 strong doors. However, Frank had another way in his mind. When he had gone to the confession box, he had noticed the walls of that room. They looked quite weak. According to Frank, they could break the confession box and enter the laundry room. From there, they could break the air vent and reach the prison's sewage system. But for this, the first step was to cut the iron plate attached to the air vent. That night, as soon as the prison lights went out, Lenny got to work. He cut some iron pipes from his room and connected them with a wrench, which he was going to use to cut the iron plate. On the other hand, Frank went to meet the most dangerous prisoner in the jail, 2 Ton. He challenged 2 Ton to a boxing match on behalf of Lenny. Frank and his companions were progressing rapidly with their plan. By now they were well aware of their escape route. The path led through the air vent into the drainage system. Moving forward from there they would reach a river. After crossing the river they would arrive at a railway station. From there they could finally gain their freedom. But they also knew that the railway tracks carried 650 volts of electricity. If they failed to cross them at the right time, all of them would die. After finalizing their plan, they decided to escape from prison in 3 days. But they did not know that Tony was standing above them, keeping an eye on their actions. He had overheard bits and pieces of their conversation and understood that they were planning something big. That night, all the prisoners gathered in the canteen to watch the boxing match between Tutan and Lenny. Actually, Tutan was extremely strong. He started beating Lenny badly. But as soon as Lenny got a chance, he threw a powerful punch straight at Tutan's face. Because of this, a diamond-studded tooth fell out of Tutan's mouth. Before the guards could arrive, Lenny quickly picked up the tooth and kept it with him. After that, he attached the diamond-studded tooth to the pipe he had prepared the night before. The next day, Tony met Frank in the bathroom and asked him questions about their plan. But when he did not get any answers, he told Frank to leave his cell door open. Along with this, he also promised to visit Frank's cell the next day. When Frank told his companions about this, their confidence weakened. They knew that they could not do anything against Tony. They also felt helpless because Tony was Raza's brother. If they ignored Tony, their entire plan could be ruined. Because of this, Frank asked his companions for permission to include a new person in their team who could help them at this time. That prisoner's name was Batista. He was actually someone who secretly delivered small amounts of drugs to other prisoners. But he did this with the government's cooperation. The purpose was to slowly reduce the supply of drugs and help prisoners overcome their addiction. The next day, Frank offered Batista a deal. According to this deal, if Batista somehow silenced Tony, Frank would take him out of the prison with them. As soon as Batista heard this, he immediately agreed. He then made a plan that would bring an end to Tony once and for all. For this, Batista prepared a special type of medicine that contained poison. He secretly took the drug out of the laboratory and handed it over to Frank. In the evening, Frank was nervously waiting for Tony. He had kept Batista's prepared drug with him. His plan was to give Tony the medicine as soon as he arrived and silence him forever. But unfortunately, Tony did not come alone to the cell. He brought another companion with him. Tony handed the poison medicine to his companion. Meanwhile, Tony was already looking at Lacey with bad intentions. Taking advantage of the moment, he started harassing Lacey. However, Lacey was not the type of prisoner to tolerate such mistreatment. In anger, he started beating Tony badly. Seeing this, Tony's companion got scared and immediately ran away. But despite his hurry, he did not forget to take the packet of medicine with him. On the other hand, Tony was beaten so badly that he could not even walk. As soon as he stepped out of the cell, he fell down the stairs and died on the spot. As soon as Raza heard the news of his brother's sudden death, he called Frank to his cell. Meanwhile, after this incident, Lacey was placed in strict solitary confinement. Everyone knew that Tony had died because of his own actions. But no one was ready to openly accept this fact. Now, only one person remained who had witnessed everything with his own eyes, and that was Frank. Up until that moment, even Tony's wife had lost her life due to consuming toxic drugs. This was the reason why Raza was desperate to make Frank reveal the truth. He wanted to know how his brother had actually died. Raza summoned Frank to his cell that very night. Unfortunately, that night was the same one when Frank and his companions had planned to escape from prison. Their plan was already in motion, and different members of the group were engaged in their assigned tasks in various rooms. Meanwhile, Frank received news that his wife had come to meet him. During their meeting, his wife informed him that their daughter had passed away in the hospital earlier that morning. Upon hearing this, Frank felt completely shattered. Now, he had no reason left to escape from prison because he had only been doing all this to reunite with his daughter. After much thought, Frank finally jumped into the pit located in the laundry room. Now, the story had reached the same point where everything had initially begun. On the night when all the prisoners were escaping, they reached the air vents. Lenny took out the pipe he had prepared and started cutting the metal plate. Once the plate was removed, a drainage system was revealed in front of them. Now, they had to crawl through these pipes to reach the stream that flowed near the prison. After facing numerous challenges, they finally reached the last section of the drainage system. However, upon arrival, they realized that the path had been blocked by a wall. They had no way forward. making their entire plan appear to be a failure. Lenny was furious at Lacey. In anger, he shoved Lacey toward the wall and threw a punch. However, Lacey managed to dodge and the punch landed directly on the wall. A portion of the wall crumbled. As soon as this happened, they all realized that the wall had been constructed recently. They immediately decided to break it down. After several minutes of persistent effort, they successfully created a hole large enough for a person to pass through. Rudy had more experience with these matters, so he volunteered to go through first and clear the way. As soon as he entered, he began digging. Unfortunately, within a few minutes, a large amount of soil collapsed on top of him, burying him underneath. Frank instantly started digging with his hands to rescue him. After a long period of intense effort, he managed to grab Rudy's hand. Rudy was barely conscious, but he was alive. Now they took turns carrying him on their shoulders as they moved forward. After walking for some time, they reached an abandoned railway station. This indicated that they were on the right track. On the other hand, Lacey also tried to assist Frank, even though his leg was bleeding. Despite his injury, he kept urging everyone to move forward. At that very moment, they heard the sound of dogs barking in the distance. This meant that the police were now searching for them, making it a life-and-death situation. Due to this, they were forced to leave behind their injured companion, Brody, and continue onward. Ahead of them was a small pond. Normally, crossing it wouldn't have been difficult, but Lenny did not know how to swim, making this phase extremely challenging for him. However, despite all the difficulties, they somehow managed to cross the pond and reach the railway tracks. Now, everything was going according to their plan. But suddenly, Batista's foot got stuck between the tracks. To make matters worse, a high-speed train was rapidly approaching them. Lenny attempted to rescue his companion, but in the process, he also ended up in front of the train. Now, only Frank and Lacey remained, who managed to move aside at the last moment and save themselves. After that, both of them reached the railway station. There, they changed their clothes and said goodbye to each other for the last time. Frank stood on the stairs that would lead him to the streets of London. But why did Frank escape from prison in the first place? The truth was that when he had completely lost hope, he told Lacey to run in his place. Then, he explained every necessary detail of the plan to Lacey and told him to leave immediately. This was the exact moment where the story had begun. When Frank was rushing towards Raza's room. Upon reaching there, he started talking about useless things to buy more time for his companions to escape. Frank made Raza so angry that, in a fit of rage, he stabbed him with a knife. Just seconds later, Cart arrived to treat his wound. But in reality, Frank was only pretending. The truth was that he was also escaping from prison along with his friends. However, the fact remained that he had put his own life in danger to give his friends a chance at freedom. At the end of the story, even if not in reality, in his mind, Frank was meeting his daughter on the streets of London. The daughter who, somehow, was still alive. Friends, if you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. See you in the next video.